Hey, Cold Cats, it's the magic word. And today we are talking about permanence in Boros, right? Yes. Permanence, they come into play, they stay on the field, and they get stuff done. Let's go. Okay, Rob. So last time we talked about all the different spells, instants, and sorceries that you might want to put in your Boros deck. That's great. That's fine. But now we're going to get into the creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, maybe even all the stuff that gets it down on the board and gets the dirty work done that Boros wants to do. So I'm going to jump into it. Last time we talked about multiple combats. There's creatures that have multiple combats too. So we're going to get into Combat Celebrant. That one attacks and exerts, and then you get another combat right after that. That he's kind of fragile, but when you need that extra combat, it's a good way to go. There's also Hellkite Charger, which combos like with so many things. So we're not going to go into all those combos, but it's a good card if you need those extra. It's a little expensive for that extra combat, right? But when you need it, you got it. And then the newest one to the list is Morag, the Fury of Akum. So this guy loves combat because every time your creatures attack, they get +1/+0. And then when you landfall in your main phase, you just get an extra combat. So definitely loves to push more combats, and your creatures even get stronger the more attacks that they go through. So definitely good to add. And in the right decks, you might add some extra combat creatures and some extra combat spells. You know, it just depends on what your deck wants, what your general wants, right?
Oh, they hit so bad. It feels bad when it hits you over and over and over again. So, like, you have to be on the piloting side of that. There's also Scourge of the Throne for you dragon lovers out there. It has Dethrone. If you attack an opponent that has more life than you, you do get that extra attack step. So it actually is okay if you're running behind on life a little bit. A good general to include all of these extra combat steps in is Aurelia, War Leader. Probably exactly what you want to think of when you think of a Boros leader. Extra attack steps, your creatures are getting in there good. Go to the Bandit Lord is also good, giving you the extra attack steps. If you happen to have Samurais, that's even better. But being able to search up an equipment, putting onto Godo, you can do like an infinite attack step if you want to go that route. That's not my personal style. I'd like to just beat you like once per turn, give you a chance to like stand up, see if you can lift up those fists. But, you know, I'll still be coming at you, but I'll be coming at you in a fair way.
And then there's also Aggravated Assault, which is an enchantment that just gives you extra combats whenever you can pay for it, which is really cool. And then a little bit more fragile is the Breath of Fury, which is an aura that bounces among your creatures, which might not do so much, but it can lead to infinite combats if you get it set up right, potentially where you have haste or the creature comes into play attacking, and you can just bounce the Breath of Fury around to different creatures and make sure you swing in, and then the game's over.
Another permanent-based strategy that you might want to consider for your Boros deck is utilizing equipment. Equipment is getting better and better the longer the game goes, because it seems that Wizards is always trying to top what can an equipment get away with. So when it comes to the equipment, a very good one to consider first off is the Hammer of Nazan. The Hammer of Nazan makes it so easy for all of your equipment just to equip as soon as you cast it. Overcoming that equip cost saves you so much mana and lets your creatures beat as soon as it comes. Of course, when it comes to Boros, you can't go wrong with Sunforger. Sunforger not only pumps up your creature, but it gives you access to any combat trick or any spell, removal or otherwise, that is in your library, and you have to cast it right now. The cost for that is you have to unattach Sunforger to do it, but to have access to any white or red sorcery that costs 4 or less, a red or white instant that costs 4 or less from your library is just nice. Access to your whole library on an equipment.
So
it's
good.
Great. So good. Again, to get around that cost, you have the Hammer of Nazan. The equip cost is just what you have to jump through hoops to do. So you do have some supporting roles in your creatures. You have Brass Squire. He's so small, you don't even notice him, but whoop, there goes your armor of, Argentum, your Argentum armor for free. Just like, whoop, there you go. Along those lines, you have the Auriok Windwalker, a little more expensive, not as impressive. It flies. So if you do like slap some equipment on it, you do have that evasive thing to hopefully make your equipment count. Another creature that's really good at getting around the equip cost is Kazul's Toll Collector. It has the ability that for 0, you can attach any equipment that you have onto it. So his hands are ready, his feet are ready, his helmet is ready. Well, his head is ready for a helmet. So just be able to lock all of your equipment onto a creature for like a big beefy swing is so nice. To search up your equipment, please consider Sunforge Mystic or Sunforger Mystic, because you know exactly what you're going to get the very first time she hits the battlefield. For 2 mana, you can tutor any equipment into your hand, and then for 2 more mana, she can drop anything from your hand onto the battlefield. Getting around those costs is very good. In Boros, you have to make your mana cost. We keep saying that. It really goes, especially for a surprise. If you have any of the equipment that equips for free as soon as it enters the battlefield, whoop, it slips onto a creature. That's even better.
And so it's basically kind of like a combat trick, because you use the Stoneforge Mystic's ability to put the equipment into play. And then if it automatically equips, like, for example, one of the newest is Maul of the Skyclaves. Now all of a sudden you have this big flying beater out of nowhere, which is great. And another thing that you could include to increase the amount of combat trick ability of equipment would be Leonin Shikari, which lets you equip as instant, which just changes the game completely. Now you have to worry about if the opponent is going to be equipping back and forth with their Swiftfoot boots or something like that.
On the more expensive end of tutoring for your equipment, you have Stonehewer Giant. So a little more expensive, but for vigilance, he can swing. And then mid-combat, he can tutor up an equipment and slap it onto a creature.
Really good, including himself.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I'm swinging. I'm bringing out the sword.
So with all these permanents coming into play and potentially leaving play if your opponents are destroying them, an important part of Boros' strategy is recursion, making sure you get back these permanents to play when you need them. We have it in the form of creatures. You want to go through those creatures with us, Rob?
Let's do it. So the first one that you really want to consider is Sun Titan. Sun Titan is just a bomb. As soon as it enters the battlefield, it gets something really cheap from your graveyard back onto the battlefield, and every time it attacks, it does the exact same thing. So your fetch lands are coming back, all your small utility creatures back on the battlefield where they are ready to help you out.
And so in some cases, when you use a fetch land, or if a land goes to your graveyard, you actually start ramping with a Sun Titan, because you're hitting your land drops and now you're getting extra lands on top of that. So it's just a really good card. And then we're going to go to Revelark, Vesperlark, Karmic Spirit Guide. I think these are all kind of in a group where they pull something back, and we've seen them in combos many times where you cycle the Revelark to get the Karmic Spirit Guide, and then that gets the Revelark back, and it just creates this great combo. The Vesperlark is a little bit newer. I myself haven't played with it that much, but if it's something that goes into the right deck, it can definitely be powerful.
And Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle, if you're casting your historic spells over and over and over again, it is also one of those great engines to get all of your small creatures back. So that is 3 or less. So a little more versatile than Vesperlark. And
then we get to other types of permanents. So for example, we have enchantment Angelic Renewal. So it's an enchantment. Whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you can sacrifice the Angelic Renewal if you do return that card to the battlefield. So that is a really good way to protect creatures that you need in play. And it is also a combo with Sun Titan if you have any kind of sacrifice outlet, because you sacrifice the Sun Titan, in place you sacrifice the Angelic Renewal, Sun Titan comes back, pulls back the Angelic Renewal, and that's it.
Rinse and repeat. Those creatures that give you extra combat, so especially Combat Celebrant, it's so fragile, but being able to exert, it dies, and then Angelic Renewal gets it back. There you go.
I hadn't thought about that. That's really good.
It's a good rattlesnake card, because if your opponents see it on the battlefield, they'll think twice before consider getting rid of your creature, because they know they're gonna have to burn a spell if you have Angelic Renewal there to protect your stuff.
Right. They're just like, why should I waste my removal on this card? And so we did touch on bringing lands back with Sun Titan, but then the best example of this is Crucible of Worlds, where you get to play your lands from your graveyard. So that it's a great ability, because if you have a fetch, you can keep doing that to ensure your land drops. Hitting your land drop every turn is really important to keeping up to pace with everyone else, especially keeping up with the green decks. You can also use things like Myriad Landscape, where you tap and sacrifice it, and then you ramp one. And now if you have Crucible of Worlds in play, you can continue to do that, and you're continuing to ramp. So it actually enables ramp in any color, which is amazing. There's also Command Beacon, which lets you put your card from the command zone into your hand, skipping commander attacks. And so if you're able to continuously play Command Beacon with Crucible of Worlds, you're just playing your general as much as you want, because it doesn't have any tax on it anymore. So you play it, it gets hit by removal, just play it again, just keep playing it. And you're going to run your opponents out of cards that way. So those were a lot of really good permanent-based recursion engines. And there's also many spells that can help those as well. So if you're an enchantment-based deck, you want to put in something like Replenish. If you have artifacts, add in Open the Vaults. There's a couple specific ones for creatures, like Brought Back, Faith's Reward. There's also Savine's Reclamation, which is very similar to Sun Titan. It has that converted mana cost 3 or less cap. So a deck that's playing Sun Titan will probably also want Savine's Reclamation, unless it's very spell focused or very permanent focused. Then you have to kind of break them up. There's also Second Sunrise, similar to the Faith's Reward.
To get your creatures back from the graveyard, you have Dusk to Dawn, you have Return to the Ranks. Return to the Ranks again, getting all your small stuff back, but still those small utility creatures. That's where it's going to go. And then one that's not very conventional is Last Ditch Effort. A lot of these have been white spells, but going to the vein of red, an instant, it's 1 red, and you sacrifice any number of creatures to do that much damage to your opponent. So EDH wipes are going to happen. This board is going to get swept. So you might as well give your creatures a chance to hit in there one more time. And then, hey, if they come back with a Second Sunrise, that's even better. Now, your Last Ditch Effort does have to be on like an Isochron Scepter or something to get that spell back. But can you just imagine, to go along with your creature recursion, there is also artifact recursion. So you have Goblin Engineer, you have Goblin Welder. They are both creatures that like to rummage in your graveyard to get artifacts back. Goblin Welder, you kind of have to play around with. You have to have an artifact on the battlefield so you can swap it with its place to get another one back from your graveyard. Goblin Engineer, you actually, when it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for an artifact card and put it into the graveyard. And then it has a second ability where it can start getting artifacts back. So keep that in mind when you want to get your Soul Ring back, when you want to get your Sunforger back. These are great ways to get them back on the battlefield and back on your creatures.
So the next aspect I want to talk about is haste and tapped creatures. And I kind of tie them together because it's both about combat and taking advantage of being able to attack directly. So we'll start with the haste creatures.
So Urabrask is probably your best friend. I consider him the nicest of the Praetors. When he's on your side of the battlefield, all of your stuff has haste and your opponent's creatures will enter the battlefield tapped. When you have creatures and they are coming in with haste, the worst thing you want to face is just a wall of blockers. So knowing that you can swing, and then your opponent, if they have to cast a blocker, will take 2 turns for it to actually do something. They cast it, it's tapped, you still get another swing at their face. Urabrask will make it happen. Anger is a fun one. Sometimes people forget that he'll be in your graveyard. You have to have a mountain on the battlefield and he has to be in your graveyard. So there's a kind of like little mini fun game to get to that goal, but you're in red. You might be discarding cards anyway. Giving your creatures haste is the best way to end the game as quickly as you can.
So there's just so many ways to give haste in red, but as Rob said, when your creatures are coming in with haste, the opponent is on the back foot. They're trying to play their creatures out. And even if they're not going to be the best blockers, they just are trying to get those blockers out. And now if you have cards that are making those blockers enter tap, it's so good. And that's why Urabrask is really good in this situation, but we're going to throw in a couple others. So there's things like Kinjali's Sunwing, which makes the creatures enter tapped. There's Thalia, Heretic Cathar, which affects creatures and non-basic lands. So after that, we're going to get into enchantments that can kind of control blockers and stuff like that.
Yeah, Blind Obedience is a really good card. You don't have to limit it to a black-white deck. It does have it in reminder deck, so you can play a Blind Obedience in your Boros deck. Authority of the Consuls is also good. It is only 1 white. Your opponent's creatures will enter the battlefield tapped, and you also gain life. It's even nicer. So it's kind of like rubbing salt in the wound. Oh, sorry, your creatures are useless, and I'm gaining life. Thank you very much. There are 2 more enchantments that we want to recommend that will keep your creatures safe in combat. One is Reconnaissance. It's 1 white, and it lets you untap your attacking creatures and remove them from combat. So you can do this after they have attacked. They've actually connected and dealt damage to your opponent. There's still a second where you can play spells during the combat step. Your creatures are still considered attacking creatures, so they can untap. So it's kind of like giving them pseudo-vigilance. If you do attack and it turns out to be bad, there are blockers in the way and your creatures will die. Use Reconnaissance to untap them and remove them from combat. Now they're safe. There's another one. It's kind of a sleeper. It's called Heat Wave. It's red. Blue creatures can't block. So I don't know if you have a lot of blue creatures in your meta that you need to sneak around. Heat Wave is where you can turn to. This enchantment does have cumulative upkeep. So you do have to pay to keep it around, but don't worry, you have more recursion to get it back. It does stop blue creatures from blocking. Other creatures can still block, but your opponent will have to pay 1 life in order for them to block. So either way, you're hitting your opponent.
That's good. I like that. Make it painful for them.
Exactly. You kind of have to give them no choice. Like they're darned if they do and they're darned if they don't.
Right. Perfect. So we have talked about a lot of different cards now. If you were going to make a deck, what kind of generals would we be putting this into? I think for equipment, you could obviously go with the new Akiri Fearless Voyager, because whenever your equipped creatures attack, you get to draw more cards. But you could also go a little bit back a ways and get a Jor Kadeen, equip him up, get some Metalcraft, and that Boros general goes up to 8 power, and that's over the magic number for commander damage.
Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, is good if you're going for equipment. Auras, if you want to, live dangerously and go the aura route, make sure to include things like Replenish and Open the Vaults, just to give yourself a little extra, redundancy with Tiana.
Or you could also do Gerard Weatherlight Hero. When your stuff dies, he'll go to the graveyard too and just bring it right back.
All right, so that's what we have to offer you for your Boros considerations. There are a lot of different options out there. So if there is something really important and you think that we missed it, please comment below. Tell us your includes when it comes to permanents that you want to include in your Boros decks. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you later. Bye.